So, welcome back to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast. And this month we're doing a series on the Irish abroad. So, I have a wonderful guest, Katie Boyle, an Irish comedian, now living in New York City, but originally from Kildare. So, Katie obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in Visual Arts from Dún Laoghaire Institute of Art, Design and Technology. And after graduation, she moved to New York City, where she began to perform her stand-up comedy acts. She now performs all across America and Ireland. Katie, you are very welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So I suppose the first question is, why America?
I guess I was thinking about Berlin or New York because they're such good cities for art, and then I'm really bad at languages. So I was like, I can barely speak English. And then I was walking past the visa place one day and it had the visa for America. So I just put down all my savings and it had a graduate visa and that was kind of it. And yeah, started the process.
Wow. And was it that you were going over to someone you knew, or you just picked someone in America, or was New York kind of a place you always wanted to go and visit?
My cousin had brought me to New York when she turned 21. She'd gotten it as a birthday present and she was like, "Oh, you should come with me." And I just gone through a breakup and I just loved New York when I came. And that was kind of really it. I didn't go with anybody, I went by myself. We had distant relatives who lived in Connecticut, so I connected with them when I came over. But other than that, I just wanted to just go do something different.
I love it. So I'm smiling because again, here, it's not everybody that goes to America and decides that they're going to do stand-up comedy. And one of the things that I heard you say and also read is that for you, Irish people are funny just being themselves. So we just kind of all fit in together, which I love because we all think we're hilarious, especially after a few drinks. But for you going to America, and taking that chance to be a comedian, to stand up in front of strangers and just talk as you would normally with Irish friends. What was that first initial calling kind of to you that you said, I'm just going to stand up and just see how it goes?
Well, I have friends who are from South America. They're my first friends when I moved over here and where we were working, and I'd be just chatting and telling them stories, and they'd always be like, "Oh, you should do stand up." So that was kind of it. Then just one day, across from where we worked, there was a comedy club, and then they had shows where they would let audience members tell jokes. But because you're in New York, you can do whatever you want, and people don't care. Like they just care about themselves, which is kind of like nice in a way. They don't, you could be crying on the subway, you could be dressed as a pigeon walking down the street. People are just like, yeah, do whatever you want, live your dream. They don't care once you're just not bothering them. So I probably would have never done it in Ireland as well because everybody's so funny. I wouldn't felt like, oh, sure, we're all funny. So I kind of was lucky that I did it in New York. But at the same time, I didn't realize that New York is like the pinnacle for comedy, let's say.
Mhm.
And so every comedian goes there, every comedian. So I didn't even realize when I was doing that. But I still think Irish audience are the best audience because they're the funniest. If I want to make something funnier, I'll bring it home and I'll have to tighten it, which is funny because everybody says New York is the best city for comedy, which it is. It's the most competition. It's the hardest
Mm.
place to make it for comedy. But I actually tell all the comedians now to go to Ireland if they want to tighten up their hour because the
Oh,
audience let you know if it's bad or
oh
or
yes.
on your comeback in a heckle that you'll be like, "Can I have that? Can I write that down? That's going in my set."
I love it. I love it. So when you were doing it that first night, as an audience member, how were you feeling like getting up on the stage?
Just terrified. I don't even really remember it because there's so much adrenaline. But yeah, terrified, excited. And then the host said that to me. He was like, "Oh, usually only open mic comedians do this. It's never actually audience members." So he was like, "You should do this." And then I just started the next day, and that was it.
Wow. Wow. I love it. And something you said as well that I heard back is that it really gets you over, I suppose, doubting yourself or standing up in front of people or your fear of public speaking, that everybody should try stand up, even if it's just for one night.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think everybody should do it for sure. Because as well, it kind of, I think sometimes, you know, we always think that everybody's kind of looking at and I don't know if it's like an Irish small town thing, but sometimes you're a bit like in your head or people are talking about your people, and then when you come to somewhere like New York and it's so big, like there's more people in New York than there is, I think, in the whole of
Mm.
Ireland. I think there's like 10 million people just on
Yeah.
Manhattan. So, it really just kind of makes you be like, oh, who cares? And you just, if you don't even do well, and especially if you have a set where you bomb, you're still alive afterwards and no one remembers it, only you. So it really kind of puts things in perspective and yeah, it just gives you a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I just think it's amazing. And when I heard you say that, I was like, oh God, yeah. I've often heard people saying they'd love to have the courage to get up and stand up. But a bit like you, it's like, ah, well, I'm only funny with my friends. I stand up in front of strangers and I mightn't be that funny at all. But how do you know unless you try? So I think the courage to get up, Katie, and try it, as you said, even if you bomb. And that goes for a lot of things in life. People are afraid of trying new things in case they fail or they'll be judged, but we'll never know until we actually try.
Yeah, and I think for Irish women as well, and this is just something I thought right now and I want to say it out loud, but
Mm.
think Irish women are really funny, and I think a lot of the time, like I have friends who would say something funny, and then their boyfriend would repeat it and get the laughs, or maybe just like I just think Irish women are really, really funny, and there's not enough Irish women doing it. So, if there's any Irish women listening who even think it, go do an open mic now, because like even if you don't do well, like who cares?
Yeah.
It takes years um, to actually be good at anything. So it's like the expectation that you would be good. And that's the problem as well with sometimes with not audience members, but like people online. They might comment about, or not even online, let's say in real life, if you did an open mic and your friend was like, well, you're not funny. It takes a while to develop that, to figure out how to make it funny on stage, how to make it relatable for everybody, not just your friends. So it's like you shouldn't kill it the first open mic. And if you do, you'll probably bomb the second one. And that's fine. That's part of it.
Love it. So when you started off and say that first night and you had a good reaction, did you think this is it? This is really what I want to do? Or would you think, oh, it'll just be a little hobby and I'll do it now and again?
No, that was it. I was like, this is what I want to do. And yeah, that was it. The first few months, you have a lot of like adrenaline, so you don't even really realize what you're doing. And then when you start to realize what you're doing, that's when you kind of do nearly worse because you're trying to figure it out. But even when I was good sets or bad sets, I was still like, this is what I want to do. This is the best feeling ever.
Or what is it? Is it the crowd, the involvement? Is it how you feel? Is it a mix of everything? Or is it that you're able to speak your truth up there on the stage?
I think it's all of it. I think as well, you know what's funny as well? I feel like we're always talking over each other, especially like, anybody with ADHD, anybody who's Irish. And like it's the crack and you're chatting over, or if you're from big families, but this is the one time where you have the
Mm.
space to talk the whole time or maybe finish your story and then if you're creative, there's no expense on it. You just go to an open mic, all you need is like a notepad. So I wasn't doing it trying to be an artist before, but I didn't have the money to have the studio or the
Mm.
equipment. So when I started comedy, it was a great way to be creative. And there's no like elitism with it. I don't even know if I'm saying that word right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with art, if you don't know someone who knows the art or the artist or the art world, it's a bit of a bubble. But with comedy, anybody can laugh at your joke. And like that's the funnest part as well about New York. The audiences are so diverse. And I've had so many different types of audiences, different rooms, and seeing those jokes work in all those rooms because yeah, it's there's no like classism to it or something. I don't know how to explain it. And then there's no expense on your end unless at some point you're going to want to buy a camera, but that's like years down the line. So yeah, so I think I forgot. I forgot what your question was while I was talking.
You're great. And I would go back to that as well because you were diagnosed with ADHD, Katie. Is that right?
Yeah, my mother told me as a child, but she's also like not mentally well, so I never really knew if that was true because she'd also say a lot of other things. Um, and it does make sense though because I was really, really hyper as a kid. My grandmother would call me Kitty the Hare, that was my nickname, and they said I would just run away. And I remember a teacher when I was like 8 sending a letter home saying she's never had to discipline a child so much for talking so much. And then I think, as women, you learn to mask it or whatever.
Mm.
But then my therapist brought it up to me over here when I started therapy here, and it just like explained a lot. And I had other family members talk about being diagnosed. And it can be like, I guess if a lot of family members can have it, but I think everybody in Ireland has it, to be honest. I think it's like family trauma.
I think we all have a touch of everything in Ireland.
Because all the symptoms, when my therapist said it, I was like, no, that's just being Irish. What are you
Yeah.
talking? But it's been really helpful to know because yeah, it just if I had a regular job, I'd probably have to do medication. But for comedy, it's brilliant. It's like a superpower.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And that's why I said sometimes, we're trying to fit into roles that don't fit into who we are, the way our mind works. And that's why, I talked about it because even when you said, I think I've answered the question, because sometimes you can go off on tangents or you get distracted or something else takes your attention. And again, I suppose in comedy, and I can only imagine because I've never done stand-up comedy. People tell me I'm funny enough, Katie. There's the other Irishness in it. But it's that when you're working with an audience, as you said, somebody shouts something or somebody answers you or says something, you then are brought to that and that becomes part of your act as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I know like I've a friend who has ADHD and really struggles with like regular job stuff because like for people with ADHD, they would have been called lazy and stuff like that, but actually just things like emails are just like so paralysis, or I've forgotten to pay bills just because I went to put in my credit card, but then remembered I didn't feed the cat. So then I got distracted. And then a month later, I'm like, oh, but I put in the details. Or like changing my mail, like my mail kept going to the wrong address just because I didn't press enter on so like little things. But then with comedy, like I was on stage the other night and there's a countdown clock going down, and that would distract a lot of comics who wouldn't have ADHD. They said they wouldn't like that. But so for my brain, I was able to count down like, okay, 5 minutes, this next bit is 5 minutes, but make it 2 minutes while I'm talking and then while dealing with someone who's shouted up something funny, but then remember to go back to the bit. But then also ignore the fact that that guy's gone up to the toilet. Don't let that distract you. But
Yeah.
I do find like that kind of speediness really works well. And then you get so much dopamine. It's like medicine.
Absolutely. It's really the perfect job for you, Katie, isn't it?
I'm in my pajamas right now, but
I love it. I love it. I love it. And we'll talk about your podcast in a minute as well, because there was an episode that I was listening to and I thought it was really good. And I wanted to talk about that more so than the other ones where you were talking with guests. But what I love most is that you faced your fear, got up on a stage, decided to just share your funniness, share your creativity with a load of strangers. And as you said, we'll see how it goes. And it became a career for you. I just love that. I love the fact of just trying something new and just seeing how it's going and having, even if you're shitting your pants or shaking on your shoes, that you're still going to get up and try it. I love it. So you were voted actually, and I'll have to find it again because I love this. I've loads of things underlined because I just love, there's so much about you that I just think is amazing. In July 23, you were named as JFL International New Face at the largest international comedy festival in the world, which is called Just for Laughs in Montreal. How does that feel, Katie Boyle from Kildare?
it was amazing. It was really great. It's something I wanted for forever. And it's a big credit over here. Now the festival did shut down right afterwards, so
The irony.
yeah. But you know what? It's funny because even though it's shut down and it's not maybe as relevant now because it doesn't exist anymore, but I made really good friends and like met really amazing comics, and yeah, it was funny because in the States it's a big deal. So, but I couldn't have gotten in on the States because I guess because I'm not from here, you have to be from the States or Canada. And then they opened up this international one. And so that was the second year they did it. And I was able to get in that way. But the international comics were like, what is this? What are we doing? And they were so relaxed about it. And they didn't want to hang out with industry afterwards. They all went for drinks. And so I had such a better experience than if I had been in the States one because that it's very like stressful, the industry in the room, people stressed out in the green room. So, it's just funny like how things can seem like a big deal over here, and then you meet comics from home or from the UK or from Australia, and they're like, I remember a comic on stage being like, new face, I've been doing this 20 years. I don't even
Yeah.
know what, but it was just like, and I was like, oh, coming from the States where this is like, this could change your career. Uh, so yeah, so I had a great time in the end, but yeah, it was great to do. So me and
Mm.
I think the other Irish comic who did it the year before is Catherine Bohart, I think.
Mm.
So and now it's done.
I just think that is brilliant because, again, no matter how much people say, oh, it doesn't matter about these, awards or whatever they are, but it is lovely to be recognized, isn't it, for your craft, or your creativity, and for your work, that and I think that's one thing about Irish people is that we're saying it's not important, but people want to be seen and heard. And I think that's why it's lovely that you're doing comedy because you're allowing yourself to be expressed and what you feel, and that your perspective, even as a comedian, you're able to share what you think and feel. And what I love is that people actually are sitting down listening to you and nobody can be talking over you like your friends or wherever else, because there isn't many opportunities where we get that platform, Katie.
Yeah, no, I'm lucky and I love it. And it's funny too when you're saying about like, oh, how we'll say like, oh, awards don't mean anything. I think it's a very Irish thing to be like, and to be humble and all that stuff. And I think it helps. But something I've learned over here is that other people will always try to humble you. So it's really important to like recognize that you've done well
Mm,
because you know, there was something recently where someone was saying like, "Oh, why wasn't Katie Boyle invited to this?" She's the like making a living off stand up in New York City. But I actually make a living because I travel. It's really hard to make a living in New York City. That the person was like, well, of course she makes a living off comedy. She lives in New York City. It's so much easier because there's so much comedy, which isn't true. All of the
mm,
clubs pay like max if you get like a weekend spot, $100. So that's impossible to live off.
mm,
It's the most competition, and you have to build it and travel. But I was like, I remember thinking like, okay, you have to like say to yourself like no, I've worked really hard. I don't, because other people will, people who don't even know what they're talking about, like I'd never walk into an accountant's place and be like, "Ooh, why aren't you at the typewriter thingy?" Like I've no idea what I'm talking about. I would never presume to. But it was like New York City is the hardest place to make a living and it's the most expensive. So then it's nice to be able to say that in your head, not let that get in, because if you don't go, no, I'm doing great, doing my best, you'll let all those, and other people will always try to tell you like, or when I did JFL, there was a person walking with me, and he goes, "Oh, how come such and such aren't in the international?" Two other Irish comics. And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And he goes, "Oh, they must not have applied." And like, he's just trying to put me down and why I
mm.
would get, and you're just like in your head, you have to be like, doesn't matter. Like I've got it. There's no competition. We could have been all in it. Sort of the way. So people will always try to put you down. So you just don't put yourself down.
Yeah.
Just
And
look
that's why
for
I think it's really important, Katie. And that's why I said I looked, and when I saw all of the things that you've achieved, said you went over there, and I just thought it's so lovely because you're still in your early 30s. You've achieved so much from going to college and then going over and saying, okay, I'm going to try something and I'm going to do it, and you've succeeded in it. And that I think that's a lot of things people hold themselves back and they allow that negative self-talk and other people's negativity to beat in on their brains and their hearts all the time. And they don't shout from the top, And I think it does come down to being Irish sometimes is self-praise is no praise. And I always say, well, if you don't praise yourself, you're going to be a long time waiting for somebody else to praise you.
No, it's so true. It's so true. Like you just can't, you just have to be like, yeah. And also then it's like, are you just trying to make them happy, the people who are negative to you? Also, I saw TikTok. I love TikTok.
Yeah.
Um, well, it was like a neurologist guy or claimed to be, people will get mad about me saying TikTok, but I thought it was good because he was saying that voice in your head. And apparently not everybody has the voice in their head, which is weird. But if you do have the voice in your head, it's not you, it's like your ego. So
Mm,
if it's like, oh, you can't do this, that's not you. You're the thing listening to it. I was like, oh,
absolutely. So obviously, yes, I work. I was laughing because that's what I'm going to come on and talk to you as well as a therapist, and I do lots of well-being and mindfulness and retreats and workshops and everything. So that's why I was fascinated, Katie, by everything that I had seen of you as well, and the bravery and courage, but also to work with what you have and the way that you talk about, your life and where we come from and how it can affect us and where we're going and how we can help ourselves and surrounding yourself with people that are actually good for you and knowing the difference. And I think you've kind of done that, where as you spoke about, your mother not being mentally well and how that because of her unwellness, that impact it had on you as a child, and then growing up and believing you were one way or not this way.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think and I know that therapy can be a bit taboo for some Irish people. There's this I think I don't know if I have this right, but I think it's because Ireland just went through so much so that further generations always had it worse. So then each generation felt like they couldn't really complain because it was always like, well, we went through the famine. Oh, well, we went through I couldn't work anymore because the Catholic Church. Oh, well, we went through a recession. So it's just like, yeah, there was just always, that's why I feel like Irish people are just like shove everything down and just get on with it. But it's so good going to therapy. Plus you're paying for it, so there's no need to feel guilty. You just,
No.
instead of saying dumping all your problems on your friends. And I find Irish people don't want to do that either. That's, we're not really, we don't dump on people. In my experience, and in my friends, it's always pretty like you have to kind of be like, are you sure you're okay? What's going on? But that's why therapy is so great because you just get to guilt-free talk about stuff. But yeah, yeah, 100%. If you don't go to therapy, you're gonna be like, I know for my situation, people would be kind of people who've been to therapy or people who can relate will be very understanding, but people can't relate who have like a good relationship with their mother, had like a very well like meaning mother bringing them up, or like, but that's crazy. You wouldn't talk to your mother, and it's like, isn't that so nice that you can't even fathom? But
Mm.
instead, they'll kind of judge you maybe, but um, it doesn't matter. Like someone who's mentally unwell and they don't want to do the work that they need to do, like if you stay, you're just in the burning house.
Mm.
It's like, of course, like for me, I put in 18 years and I'm like, okay, goodbye. It's
Yeah.
responsibility more. And like I was a child. So, and then you have to go and like figure out all that stuff. And like I think I would have been kind of defensive or dated a lot of people like her. It's so textbook when you learn about therapy because I was trying to fix them or like recreate, or that's what you identified as love. But then when you go to therapy and they just say this to you and it's someone who's qualified, then you can see the patterns and you're like, oh, okay. Or you can even see when you're being like defensive or you're recreating something. But yeah. Um, but yeah, no, I'm the best decision I ever made was cutting her out, and I'll never regret it. Even if someone's like, "Oh, but do you think?" And it's like, "No, because you're not going to change." So I'm not. It'll just be toxic for me. I even thinking about it would make me feel dizzy.
Mm.
And again, put in 18 years. So I'm always
Yeah.
like, parent is being toxic. If your parent is being toxic to you the way a partner is, and if people would be like, you need to break up with that person, that's a form of DV, that's a form of emotional abuse, all of this, then why would you stay with a parent doing it? And the
Mm.
same with a child doing that to a parent. That's common as well. Like families don't get a pass for treating you bad just because they're family members. So yeah, that's my
Yeah.
speech.
I love it. I love it. And again, and one thing I would always say to people is we can't change the behavior of anybody else. We can only change how we react and respond to it. And again, are you willing to? And I just said this to a group at the weekend too. I brought away on retreat, which is not prayers and rosary. It's deep, deep down and dirty work, as I do say. It's getting right down to the core issues. But if somebody continues to physically kick you in the face, you'll either step away or you'll fight back to try and defend yourself. Well, negativity and toxic relationships are the same as allowing somebody to keep kicking you in the face with a hubcap boot or whatever those big thick boots they have in Ireland out in construction is. It's allowing yourself to be hurt constantly, Katie. So I love the fact that you found therapy and it was able to make sense in your head of how you were being treated, what you accepted as a child as normal, in your life, and realizing that wasn't normal for you at all. And one of the things is, I suppose, and it's becoming a little bit more open in Ireland, is going to therapy or getting support and help. Whereas in America, we've heard about therapy for years from the movies. And again, I suppose it was a little bit of a laugh in Ireland. All the feckin' Americans, sure, they're all going to therapy. But everybody, I would say everybody needs some part in their life of counseling support or therapy to make sense of what's going on for them then or in the past or even where they want to go in the future and trying to work it all out. So it's not that there has to be something wrong with you. And I don't know if you agree with that, Katie. I don't think there was anything wrong with you. I think it was just trying to make sense of everything that you had learned growing up.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll say, like, I was afraid that I would go and they would like diagnose me with something. Like, I was so afraid that something would come out, but it's not like that, or that you just fall apart because it's like you've just been shoving stuff in a sort of press or whatever. But I will say, like, even if you don't have family issues, people should go to therapy because like I've known friends who had a perfect family upbringing, perfect parents, but it was, do you know what I mean? It's nothing to do with the family. It's just it could have been something like, inherited or just undiagnosed ADHD, especially for women. Like a lot of women go undiagnosed because they learn to mask. And then or it could be even just a bad relationship. And it could have been even just something like they were in a relationship for a year, the guy broke up with them, they're blindsided. And some people would kind of be like, okay, I can move on with that. And other people, it could mean that they cannot trust future partners or ruining relationships. So it doesn't have to be like something crazy happened. It could be even something you don't even know as a kid, like a bicycle bumped into you and now you don't can't explain. And then just talking out that stuff in therapy. But yeah, I feel like it's so good because it's just for yourself. Because for
Mhm.
me, there was definitely situations in relationship where I was causing problems, or even with maybe with friendships, like maybe looking into stuff that like going through therapy really teaches you how to be like more secure, how to not like in because if you grow up in a household where you're in trouble all of the time, for stuff you can't even, you just say like, oh, I like pie. And they're like, what do you mean I'm a terrible mother? And you're like, what the fuck? So then all of that stuff just trains you to go into the real world as like, okay, if I'm in trouble or I need to, people please or whatever. So then therapy teaches you to stop doing that. And then you have healthy friendships and healthy partners. And it's just like, I only did it for like a year and it changed my life.
Mhm.
Yeah, and now like I'll recognize people who are like that, people who'll be like, you didn't text me back, is everything okay? And I'm like, you need therapy. I just missed a message. But you know what I mean? Like it's so funny when you go and you're just like, oh yeah, no, this is you have to untrain like what you were taught as a child. Like even now, I'd be able to read everybody's mood in a room, which probably is good for stand-up, but it's
Mhm.
because I have to read the mood of like the door opening, like what mood is gonna ha come in. And so now if I'm like at an event or a party, I have to be like, and it's probably why I drank, probably why a lot of Irish people drink, because it kind of no like dumbs that down a bit. But now I try not to drink as much and barely as much compared to what I used to. But yeah, so now just going, okay, this is a you thing, relax. If that person's in a mood, that's their thing. It's just funny like how just a year of therapy like completely changed everything.
I love it. That is brilliant. And I think it's really important for people to say that. And again, all the guests, they talk about everything very openly, like you do as well. And I think the more conversations we have about it openly, and especially with people like you, Katie, that are in the public eye and doing comedy, is making fun almost of it, all of the toxic things so that it's not as taboo and that people can talk about it openly, even if it is through a laugh, because sometimes laughter is the greatest medicine. It really is when people are really stuck in themselves and like you, a comedian goes up on the stage and starts talking about their own therapy or their own relationships, it makes them feel normal.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think as well, like most people are thinking about that stuff anyway, or they're kind of thinking, even when people judge you and they're like, oh, I always find like you're probably the one who wants to do it the most because you're putting up that block. But like my stepmom is very like she's a bit younger than my dad. She's like 9 years younger and she's very like clued in with all stuff. But I remember when I was thinking about going to therapy, she was like, yeah, if you hurt your back, you go get a massage, like massage your brain. So that was like the first. I'd heard of maybe that generation positively mention therapy.
Brilliant. Yeah, I call what's going on in the inside the invisible wounds. They're left open, nobody else can see them, but they're constantly being aggravated by life and our old patterns and conditionings. But they're the ones that we have to spend the most time and attention caring for. Because nobody else sees them, what we're thinking and feeling. As you said, if there was a big open wound on your arm, everyone would be looking after you and minding you. But when they can't see that invisible wound, and again, nobody can truly understand you. So, just as you said, which was really lovely, as Irish people and maybe people in general, they don't want to burden their friends because they don't want their friends going away thinking, oh, what can I do for Katie or what can I do for Sharon? Can I help enough? Because usually people can't help you. They're not able to help with what's going on. And I'd say to people, just be there and listen, just listen and say, I'm here for you. That's enough. So if there's anyone listening to the podcast and they hear this and go, Jesus, yeah, I wasn't there for my friend, there might not have been anything you could have done but just listening. So again, never give out to yourself because you can't help anybody. You're doing your best. That's what I always say. We have to, it's the person like Katie and myself, you have to do what's right for you. And I love that you recognized what was going on for you enough to go to therapy. And you spoke about it in your podcast, The Shift. And I love the name. And for anybody that doesn't know what The Shift is in Ireland, I don't know where you've been or across the world. Would you like to explain what The Shift is, Katie?
Yes. Well, for me it was kissing, but then someone else said it was more for them. But I grew up it was always the kiss, the shift. But like I grew up, we wouldn't have used it. My family live in Lamford as well, so I would have heard it from my friends in Lamford. But it was Des Bishop when he used to do the podcast with me who came up with the term. Originally, he wanted to call it the Irish word for sex, but when he said that to me, I was like, "What's that word?" And he was like, "Oh, okay, we'll do the shift."
I love it. And I think every Irish person will definitely get it all the time because it is brilliant. I hope you get the shift too, but you'll get the name of the podcast, The Shift. So it's talking about sex and dating from an Irish perspective, which is lovely. And can you tell me, like, now that you're living in America, is it very different, where we meet somebody? And I know it's changed a lot generationally, but it's like you're seeing them for a while and then you're exclusive or you ask the other person to be boyfriend or girlfriend. But I remember years ago in America, it was like you're not exclusive, so you have permission to date other people. And in Ireland, we thought, it must be fucking joking. If he's going out with me, he's going out with me and there's nobody else.
Yeah, and I think have changed at home for younger people because I remember talking to a girl who was way younger than me, Gen Z, and she was like, "Oh no, like unless they're very specific on we're in a relationship," which I thought, "Oh my God, that's not the way it was when I was growing up." But everybody knew each other in the town, so it was just kind of different. But over here, it's very like labels and terms are very important. And if you're exclusive, that doesn't mean you're in a relationship, which is very confusing. It's all very technical because exclusive is just, well, we're not going to get STDs. It's not very romantic. And then relationship is a different kettle of fish. And then you have to make sure to ask, especially in New York City, like, okay, are they poly? Are they monogamous? Are they so like if you're on Hinge, it'll say all of that and what they're looking for, which is it's kind of helpful, but it's just funny. Like I didn't really grow up even having to think about that stuff, which is great for people who are poly and non-monogamous and all of that. But yeah, it's just there's a lot. It's nearly kind of touch.
Quite
I
hard.
guess at home, I was just kissing someone in a bar, and if they took your number, yeah.
Well, that's what it was in our time. If you kissed them, you were going out with them, and that was it, until they told you otherwise, or you didn't want to kiss them again. But yeah, now I just think it's gone very complicated. I'm not sure why it's so complicated, but even the terminology, like exclusive, but that doesn't mean that you're in a relationship. I mean, how the hell do you know, Katie, then?
Yeah, and then it could mean to someone else that it isn't. Like, you have to you nearly need a written contract. I remember going out with a guy. I asked him on the first date, and we'd know each other through, he was a comedian. No one's going to figure out who it is, so it's fine to say that he's not successful. But
He got no award.
but he asked me out, and on the first date, he was like, "Is this a date?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I hope so." And he's like, "Okay, good, yeah, it is a date." And I was like, "But are you dating anybody else?" And he was like, "I go on dates." So I was like, "Okay, that means he just goes on random dates. That's fine." Month and a half later, I had found out that he was actually in a long-term relationship, which then he tried to say, oh no, we're not monogamous, which is bullshit because most people, majority non-monogamous, that community are very open with it. They've got rules. They always let people know. And he had tried to like, convince me into unprotected, So I was like, oh, you could have risked her health. You're going to risk my health. But my friend, one of my best friends who lives in Sydney, was like, from now on, you need to give these like men in America like a document that is like basically, are we dating? Would anybody be upset if they found out you were dating me? Like, what do you qualify as dating? But it's just funny because it can make you quite like, yeah, clinical then with it going forward.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd survive in the dating world now, Katie. I'm too big-mouthed first of all and all heart, so I'd kind of just be saying straight away, "Oh, I love you," and they'd probably run a mile.
Well, yeah, I'm not. I'm done with it here anyway. I'm in a long distance relationship with a man in Ireland. So I'd
Hmm.
rather be in long distance than have to do. And like with him, we've known each other since we were really small. But as soon as we started back together, it was just easy peasy, direct. This is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. No. And a lot of my friends over here have been saying like talking about Irish men, been saying like, oh, they want a man from Ireland. They find them better crack, a bit more direct. I do say be careful with the ones that just moved here because they get a lot of women. So they're just like, what's happening? I've never been, gotten these level of these beautiful, and the women just go mad for the accent. So I'm like, either get one in Ireland or one that's been here a while. He's not like, oh, shiny new things. But it's
Yeah.
funny, like Irish men are great, and I didn't date them for a long time over here. But like, or maybe because I'm Irish though as well, like just that banter. Like I was on the plane and I told my boyfriend, oh, I refused to eat at the airport because it was $15, 15.99 before tax for half a wrap. But the flight in the airport for ages, and then I was having a long flight, and I was texting him off the Wi-Fi on the flight, being like I'm literally starving, but I refused, and was getting a good bit of money for that gig, so my mentality was like I had a protest, and and then he immediately was like, "All right, Bobby Sands," and I think that's so funny. You would never American, and I had text back as well, like, "Oh, how very rebel," like I'd kind of made like a Bobby Sands joke at the same time he was sending it. But it was just like, oh, you just don't get that like level of, coming from the same banter. And then
Hmm.
if you do try to do the banter here, sometimes they think it's mean. Fairness, sometimes we probably are a bit too, but at home that's very like or
No.
sarcastic. Even when I go home, I forget that people are being sarcastic because you don't change your tone of voice here. Whereas in America, there's a tone of voice, so I have to remember people are just being sarcastic.
Yeah. Yeah, Irish are very sarcastic and it's the humor in it, and I've often heard people saying, Jesus, you wouldn't want to be soft because, if you went out with your friends, you'd come away thinking there's something definitely wrong with me. But it is the type of banter, and I suppose it hardens you up as well, to laugh at yourself and laugh at life a little bit, as well, doesn't it? So I love that you're dating an Irish guy, but when you were dating guys that were in America, they may not have all been American, but do you now see, or did you have to try and fit in? I suppose that's the word I'm trying to use. Did you have to fit in with them, or could you be yourself?
I mean, I think I could be myself. They really liked that I was Irish. A lot of them like the accent, and then you are just naturally funnier. And so they love that. But then after a while, it's hard being the one that's always the funny one. And then I do it as a job, or who's always the crack, who's always the conversationalist, who's always like, come on, let's go out. And I found with my ex, he's lovely, he's American, but, didn't want to go out as much, keep up with the Irishness of it. Not saying I want to go out all the time, but like, yeah, and just that I remember a few times being like, I can't be the one always initiating conversations. and he like would Google questionnaires to ask me. But it's just a different, whereas like, yeah, with Irish on Irish, you can kind of keep up that banter level. But no, I felt like they really liked it, as in, but there'd be like even the English, you don't speak the same English, and that can be quite frustrating when you're in a relationship. It's so funny how like words mean completely different. It's the same word, has a definition in the English dictionary, but if you're coming from Ireland and you're coming from America, it can mean something completely different and have different attachments to it. So it's just interesting how even something like the language, even though we speak the same language, it felt like we were trying to speak to like as if English was neither of our first languages. And that is hard in a relationship, I think, because yeah, you're just constantly getting like confused or mixed up or having to like edit your language or edit your slang. So I found that a little frustrating. Oh, and can I say sex on this?
Oh, yes, you can.
Horrific over here because I forgot like what's so nice with Irish men is and in my experience, because sex at home for us is a bit like it's just sex or whatever, it's like it's not as, whereas here it's been so like dissected, and there's so much porn and there's so much that I find in my experience, and not everybody, but even like let's say with my ex, like I like kissing, I like, just touching, like all that stuff, that should be like, ooh, a turn on. But for him, it was 0 to 100. He's at like high kink levels, but we've missed all the
Mm.
kissing is the intimate. Like there was like like the last year in our relationship, there wasn't a lot of kissing, there wasn't a lot of um, you know,
Intimacy.
yeah, and I find like, oh, being back with Irish, it's like, oh, all those little things like touching the leg, like
Mm.
that's nice. But over here, it's just a lot of people, and I know a lot of women as well who'd be like, oh, he didn't choke me straight away, and you're like, what? What happened to just like fair, like, and not to king shame, but I still feel like that could be like further down the road, exploration, and just not for me. If that's for you, that's fine, but that's harder to find in New York, people who are just like who just like kissing. It's just
Mm.
like
Yeah.
the rest of stuff, and then that's enough. So yeah, I found that a bit hard here, that it's all 0 to 100 in like a couple of seconds, and it's just not for me. No
Yeah.
kink shame. It's okay that it's not for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I think again, when you were saying that, the kissing and the touching and everything, it is the intimacy because it's getting to know each other and getting to know each other's bodies without going and saying, now I'll tie you up there off the ceiling and we'll do whatever we're going to do. But again, I think maybe in America, maybe they've been exposed to porn and this excess of, what sex, and sexual expression means for them. And maybe there's a pressure or they like it or whatever it is, or they want to explore a bit more. Where Irish people, and again, I'm sure there's lots of kinky Irish people out there. I'm not saying that you're not to do this, but it's basically that we are really about the connection, aren't we? We're really about the connection and the intimacy and getting to know each other. And there's a little bit of shyness sometimes, Katie, as well, isn't there, when you meet somebody?
And I like that. And again, I
Mm.
think people like that will maybe one day explore the other stuff with a partner, but it's like that's nice for me personally to save that. Like start off, the little stuff should be like exciting and
Mm.
erotic so that later on you can pull that in. But like with my ex, it was 0 to 100, that, it kind of all just I couldn't be at that level. And then the other stuff he was suggesting, I was like, this isn't even in my world. Like I
That's a
can't.
circus.
100%. What he was suggesting is technically qualified as a circus, because I was like, what? But again, for him, it's better for him to be with someone who's at that, and for me to be with someone. But what was it again? Oh, you were saying the shyness.
Yeah.
Uh, oh, the porn thing. So I have a lot of American guy friends who have shared with me, and they'd be comedians, so they're pretty open with this, but they've talked a lot about porn. And I have a joke about porn as well. So we've had these conversations, but they said that it ruined sex for them because they watched
Mm.
it so young, but they were watching like straight away, like multiple people or like kind of degrading stuff to women that they weren't able to get off with their partners.
Mm.
And a lot of them had to quit it. There was a guy I know who went like he had to like go celibate for like a year just to like reset himself. And another guy was saying he was addicted to it, and he was in his like late 30s every day, but then wasn't able to enjoy sex with his like
Mhm.
stunning, amazing partner because it was like unrealistic what he had trained his brain.
An
So I
expectation maybe as well that that's what they're supposed to be or perform like, the same as a porn movie or whatever they watched, when it's unrealistic really because that's not your connection and your intimate feelings with that person.
that'd be like asking me to like if you were into like oh yeah, if you were like into like football, like soccer. If you were like, I never know whether to call it football or soccer because growing up it was football, and then over here you have to say soccer. But then when I went back, my brothers were saying you should say soccer because Gaelic football is football. So I'm all confused. But uh, but like that'd be like if you were watching that all the time and then expecting me to go out and be a pro.
Mm.
Like they're professionals. Also, you're not a porn man. Those men are not you either. So it's like not being able to realize and not no I think porn can be if it's like all legal and safe and all of that stuff. There's like some cool feminist porn women, and if you guys want to watch it together and you're interested in that, that's all grand. Once you just
Mm.
don't expect that from your partner, or once you haven't trained your brain that that's the only way you can get off is if you're throwing them up against the wall. Like I don't know, crazy stuff. Like it's just not. Are you in a villa in Spain? No, like it's
Yeah.
not.
With cameras all around you capturing your every moment, absolutely. So again, that difference, I suppose, in cultures, in backgrounds and what they've seen, and then coming back to the comfortableness, I suppose, or the knowing or the understanding of the Irish person that you're now dating. It is lovely in a way, because I often think about when we move to different parts of the world and we meet people from those parts, and again, there is slight differences in culture and everything, but again, it has to be that connection and understanding, as you said, Katie, and meeting at the same place and getting to know each other and trust each other. And the fact even that you're with your long distance relationship now is that you know each other for so long. Do you look at yourself and think back to when you were a child and how you perceived yourself, and especially going through stuff with your mom, but how you see yourself now? If you could look back to her, what would you say to Katie Boyle?
I don't know, to be honest, what I would say, because I feel like a lot of it probably got me to where I am now. I don't know, like, yeah, I don't think other than it'll be okay, but like, yeah, I think, I was pretty drunk most of my teens. Like my boyfriend now, we were friends since we were teens, and he was telling me stories, and I was like, I do not remember. Like, and I remember a lot of this. I remember a lot of the stuff with my mom and everything. But you were just in fight or flight mode, and then I would
Mm,
just drink on the weekends with my friends. So yeah, I don't think there's much I would say. I don't even know if I would have believed it. I would have just thought
mm,
if I popped up to me, a 14-year-old me, I would have thought I was mental. I was like, this is it. I fucking knew this was that. So I always thought, I remember Googling and it says like mental health issues come out like 21, 22. And it wasn't until I was like 28. I was like, oh, I'm fine. I'm past this. But then I've met so many friends here who are diagnosed bipolar, other
mm,
things people because they're here in the States, they've gotten the help that they need and they're living life grand. And
mm,
they're not, and because I just never knew what my mother had and I associated it with like this negative, but
mm,
it's just different. She just never it was and that like is a massive part on families as well, because from my perspective growing up, they'd rather I was minding her, a child, when they all knew she had an issue, and it was better that she was, a bit wacky than diagnosed crazy, which
mm.
is bad in Ireland that someone who could have a diagnosis, like someone who's diagnosed and taking pills are safer than anybody that
Yeah.
we know. You know what I mean? Like, and whatever help they need and trial and error with different stuff. But like, I know people here are super successful and healthy but like, yeah, they've tried different pills, they've tried different therapy and different forms, and they're better people to be around than people who are like, you're like, okay, well, that person needs, but they're more likely to get it now. Whereas I feel like back home then it was very taboo to get the help that you needed. So yeah, so I think yeah, if I had shown up, I would have definitely thought I was mental.
And that could have set you on a different trajectory altogether. And I think it was years ago, it was that not just taboo, but it was probably not recognized. It was one of the things we heard when we were younger is that that person suffers with their nerves, and it was whispered. So I was thinking, I could never understand what this nerves thing was. Obviously, I was just going, the fuck is their nerves like? But this is how it was described to us, because again, even the adults didn't fully understand. They just said, oh, they struggle sometimes and they've had these things going on in their lives and sure they'll be grand. And again, that was for people, just like we spoke about earlier, Katie, is that people don't want to be burdened because they don't know what to say or to do and they don't know how to fix it. Because that was the thing. If you can't fix it, well, then we'll just ignore it. So now I think, oh, somebody is ringing. But it must be yours now, Katie. It's definitely not mine. But anyway, there you are. No, I don't know what it was. Anyway, we'll just pretend it's someone from the divine giving us a lovely message.
Mine's
But what
like that.
I think that you going away to America, doing what is going to create so much fun in your life and open these doors to finding out who you really are, but also opening the door to therapy for you and kind of making sense of all that. I just think it is amazing. And for me, I think some people have to leave their family, they have to leave their country of origin and just explore and travel. And you're not just exploring a country and traveling and seeing sights, you're learning about yourself constantly, Katie. So I think you're kind of like a role model, if I can put that award on you as well. You're kind of like a role model for people that no matter what you've been through, and you can still go out there and create something new for yourself, even when you're going through the shitstorm with mental health issues, and that you have to kind of take control and say, well, I'm going to do something about it now. I'm not going to believe everything bad that I was told in my life or that I keep speaking about in my own head secretly, that I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And another thing, just when you're saying secretly in your head, that was another thing I learned from TikTok. But it really does work. Like if you decide to say, I'm this type of person and you just say it every day, then it becomes normal. And it's our brain is just like a computer. You just put in the code. I'm not gonna be on edge if someone doesn't text me back. Oh, they're probably busy. And then it becomes normal. I don't even notice when friends don't text me back now. But like if it was 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh, they definitely care that I said banana instead of pineapple. And like it's just, but that kind of, yeah, just putting in like write down all the things you or annoy yourself. Like this thing, you're just wrecking your own head in the end. But
Mhm.
then yeah, just if you just every day, it's just like habit, but your brain is just it's just a computer.
I love it. Katie Boyle, it's just amazing to chat to you and to hear your perspective on life and therapy and just living in relationships in different countries and coming back home again and just being you. And I just think you're amazing, to be honest.
Thank you so much. No, you are.
Oh, you really are, though. I think you are. It's just lovely. And again, I work quite energetically with people and I'm drawn to people and I'm drawn to some of my guests, something they'll say or do, and it'll just click with me and it'll stay with me. And I'm going, okay, I'm going to write that down because there's something there. And it was kind of, I suppose, maybe halfway through this podcast, I realized that it's not just and it is your comedy, obviously, but it's your energy as well. There is a lovely lightness to your energy that people actually feel before you even open your mouth. You have this. Again, we'll go back to the Irish shyness quality. It's nearly like sometimes, I'm going to say something now, or, oh, geez, I hope you don't mind kind of thing. But that adds to who you are, so for everything that you're doing, continue to do that just as you, because you that you've now created is just shining, you're glowing. So I can see you going on much further and doing lots and lots of other things, all over the world. You're amazing, Katie.
Oh, no, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank
Mm.
you.
You're
My
welcome.
cat is sitting beside me listening right now. Hold on, let me
Is
see if
that
I can.
Charlotte?
That's Madra.
Madra, oh my God, beautiful.
He looks at me every few seconds when I'm talking as if like pet me, so I have to double job it. This is the ADHD. I'm petting and listening and talking.
Well, do you know what? And cats are were healers back in the Egyptian times, and people don't realize that cats will come and sit on your chest when you're anxious. They will sit on your lap if you're kind of feeling anxious in your stomach. They will help to keep you grounded and focused, but they'll also tell you to fuck off if they don't want any time with you because they need to do their thing.
No, cats are the best. I actually think cats helped my mental. Well, I grew up, we always had cats as well, which was a nice buffer with whatever was going on in the house. But then when I got cats over here, 100% because you just have a creature at home, so you're not getting that like fear of missing out or whatever. Because you're like you're with the best, you're with the better than humans. They're so lovely, and it's so true about that because they'll always come up and purr beside me, especially if I'm on my period. Those two boys are like, we got you.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then they're good boundary setters as well. So if you learn to respect a cat's boundaries, you'll be really good with people.
I
You know,
love
because
it.
they're just so direct. They're like, I don't want to talk to you now, but I'll talk to you tomorrow. And
Yeah.
you know, accept that with a cat, you should be able to accept that with people.
I think that's great advice. I think you should do that as a poster. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. So, Katie, we're nearly coming up to the time, but I want to mention that you are back in Dublin on the 18th of October with your show Therapy, and it's in Liberty Hall in Dublin. It's also your birthday, is that right?
Yeah, my birthday is on the 15th, so I fly in on my birthday. But yeah, I'll just use it as the day to celebrate. I don't really like ever doing anything for my birthday, so this is kind of nice, set of a good excuse to yeah, hang out with people after the show as well. I think it's the biggest room. It is the biggest room I'll have done in Ireland, but we'll kind of see. I was just back for a tour, so hopefully people still come out, but fingers crossed. Whoever comes, it'll be fun.
Well, I can only wish you more success in everything that you do, Katie, and I hope I get to see you live sometime in the future. Maybe I'll get to America and be one of the Irish down the back roaring and shouting at you. And you'll say, I recognize that old accent.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. So for everyone that's listening, you can find out more about Katie and www.katieboyle.com, excuse me. You're also on YouTube, and one of your videos, I'll do it myself, has over 491,000 views, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, that's my boyfriend pressing repeat on it every day.
Yeah, it is not. I just think that's amazing. You're also on Facebook, Katie Boyle Comic, and on Insta on Katie Boyle Comic. So everybody, please pop over and give Katie a follow and a like, subscribe to her YouTube channel, and give her loads of support. She's our Irish hero, our comedy hero in America, and I just can't wait to see where you go. And I'll be following along and cheering you on from the sidelines in the west of Ireland. Katie Boyle, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
And thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of yourself and we'll see you then.